Did you ever wonder what sort of advice you would give yourself at the beginning of your sewing journey if you could go back in time and tell your beginner seamstress self? Well, I have a real treat for you today. I've been thinking about the sort of sewing advice that I would have given myself when I started sewing. Do remember to stay tuned until the end to find out what is the one single most important piece of sewing advice that you can give to anybody who's starting out in the sewing journey. Dear healer, don't worry about that first pattern sale. Sewing pattern companies do sales regularly. And I know it feels like this first sale that you are experiencing, you feel like you have to buy every single pattern that you possibly may think you're going to make. But trust me, in another couple of weeks, it will be a Labor Day sale, or it will be a bank holiday sale, or whatever, or it will be a surprise weekend sale. You don't have to buy all those sewing patterns during the sales for fear that there will never be another opportunity to get that sewing pattern at that price again. Take a deep breath, relax, and buy the sewing pattern that gives you the most joy. Buy the sewing pattern that you are the most excited about sewing, not just the pattern that you think is the best bargain. And the same also applies to fabric, my dear. You don't have to buy every single piece of fabric that you are attracted to. Sure, that fabric may be as attractive as Chris Hemsworth, but sometimes you just gotta look, acknowledge that you guys would have had something great, but accept that it's not going to happen at this time. Maybe in a future scenario, but stick with the fabrics that you know you're going to actually use. Stick with the fabrics that you know that you absolutely love. And again, stick with the fabrics that give you joy, because if they give you joy, you don't even need to make yourself do the work. You don't even need to push yourself. You just want to create the vision. So don't worry about the fabrics. Textile manufacturers are still creating wonderful fabrics year on year. There will always be something new. Don't buy something out of fear that you're never going to be able to get this exact piece of fabric at this exact price ever again. Yes, you may never find that exact piece of fabric, but like your mom always used to say, if you miss one bus, there are plenty more buses to take you to the same destination. Comparison is the pits. You have been inspired to sew because you have been reading all of these wonderful, amazing sewing bloggers, and you've seen the wonderful things that they are making, and you can't wait to make things that great. I get it. It can be such a heady brew, an exciting, intoxicating time. But remember that they have been doing this for far longer than you have. And the things that they are producing, that is the cumulative effect of years upon years of skillful practice and habit development and developing processes in which they can produce things quickly. So slow down. You gotta learn how to sit up before you can crawl, and you gotta learn how to crawl before you can toddle, and you gotta learn how to toddle before you can start running. But just stick with the incremental habit building and practicing the skill set, and before you know it, you will be flying. But stop comparing yourself with others. Be intrigued and be inspired, yes, but also stick to your own goals and stick to your own pace. Don't beat yourself up because you feel you're not sewing as much as other people. You have your own life going on. You've got other things that you need to do as well. Baby steps. Baby steps forward are the way. What you have is plenty enough. I know you think that the vintage sewing machine that you have isn't going to be good enough for the things that you want to create because there are all these fancy digitized computerized models around. But trust me, vintage sewing machines are amazing. And if you stick with it and learn your machine and get to know your machine, it will become the most valuable asset that you have in your sewing cave. And guess what? It would have only cost you a teeny tiny fraction of a brand new computerized, fancy looking plastic machine. Now, let's talk about precious fabrics. You know the fabrics that I'm talking about? The really nice fabrics that you feel that you've bought, but they deserve just the perfect sewing pattern with just the right interfacing and just the right zipper, and it has to be the perfect gold-plated zipper, and it has to look exactly like the way that I saw somebody else who made it with the same fabric. You need to just let that go and cut into the fabric. Cut that fabric. There is no point in buying beautiful fabric that gives you joy and then you just fold it up and put it in a dark corner, because you got to store your fabric in a dark container. Otherwise, it will have sun damage, and that is such a shame. But beautiful fabric was not meant to be stowed away where it cannot be seen, where it cannot be appreciated, and where it cannot imbue you with the joyous feeling that filled you up when you bought that fabric in the first place. So cut into that fabric. Yes, you may make a mistake, but you know what? So long as you get a wearable garment afterwards, all the mistakes in the world do not nullify the joy a beautiful fabric brings. So cut into that fabric. I can't stress this enough.
Cut into that fabric.
Pinterest. Let us talk about Pinterest. Yes, it can be a lot of fun scrolling through, finding inspiration images and then pinning them, and doing research on just the right sort of Breton top and collecting hundreds of inspiration images. But you know what? Life rewards doers, not thinkers. Remember that whatever it is you're envisioning, whatever it is you want to do, just make a start on it. Take the action on it rather than spending hours upon hours researching, scrolling through Pinterest. And whilst we're talking about Pinterest, let us also talk about the unrealistic imagery of most of the Pinterest inspiration pictures that you have on your sewing inspiration board, Hila. We know that Photoshop is a thing. We know that there is no way you can make a garment that doesn't crease. There is no way you can make a perfectly fitting garment. You can make the garment look fitted when you're standing in one pose, but the mere fact that you are moving around with it it is going to have wrinkles, it is going to have lines, it is going to have pulling. I mean, even the original garment that we were born in, our skin, it creases and it makes lines on the parts that we move the most. Look at your elbows, look at your knees. So why would you expect a garment that you make to behave any differently? So get over this idea that you can make a garment that looks exactly like a Pinterest image. Just make the garment and enjoy the process and enjoy the fact that you've made something that you love. And never forget that there are other ways of sourcing your clothes. Sewing is fun, yes. Sewing is your hobby, yes. But don't beat yourself up because you haven't had the time to sew this new t-shirt and then you have to go and buy it. That is perfectly fine. Be kind to yourself. Just because you've picked up sewing doesn't mean that you have to sew every single thing that you wear. It's still fine to buy clothes if you need to buy the clothes. Be kind to yourself. And most importantly, keep having fun. If you reach a point where it's no longer fun, it's okay to step back. It's okay to give yourself space. It's okay to explore other interests. And if it comes a time where you feel that you can move on, that's fine as well. Do not at any point ever feel like you have to stick to it even when you've lost the joy, just because you've invested so much by buying all that fabric and all those sewing patterns and all that equipment. You can still just say goodbye to all of that if it's no longer any fun. And that's the most important thing. Keep the fun, keep the intrigue, and keep the inspiration. And if that's lost, do you know what? These hobbies and interests, they're just like a bus. If one passes through your life, the season is over. You can open yourself up to something else. There are hundreds of other things that can be a creative outlet. And also, do not feel that your sewing mojo is never going to come back. I know the first time that you're going to lose your sewing mojo, you're just going to feel like, oh my gosh, what is wrong? But don't worry about it. Just like with gardening, we know that everything works in a cycle and it is seasonal. Just as winter needs to happen for the plants to conserve their energy before they unfurl in spring and summer, so it is with any creative endeavor. In gardening, something that just grows non-stop and keeps on producing is called a weed. So creativity works in the same way. It's not just going to be non-stop bubbling forth. There will be periods where you just don't feel like doing that, but don't worry. It's not that it's gone. It's just that it is consolidating, working away so that when the time comes, it will burst forth and you will have your sojo back. And your sewing mojo, it will come and it will go. And the worst thing you can do is try and force it to come back. But believe me, it will come back of its own accord. And if it doesn't, maybe the season for sewing is over and you need to open yourself up to a new season of something else that will also enrich your life. The time that you will spend sewing will enrich your life and change you in so many ways. And that isn't negated because you may decide that you're going to move on from sewing. So always keep yourself open to any creativity that might come your way And at the same time, remember, everything has got a cycle. Everything waxes and wanes. And that's okay. So that's my sewing advice for my younger self. I just watched that back and I realized that I'm talking in a very auntie-like way. I was just remembering my auntie who was always good at giving advice like that. So anyway, now it's your turn. I want to hear from you. Let me know what sort of sewing advice you would give your baby beginner seamstress self in the comments box down below. If you haven't already, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to my channel. I put out sewing related content 2 to 3 times a week. I'm also passionate about habit development and productivity and things like that. And I'll be sharing a little bit more of that on here because that's intertwined with how I'm able to make time for sewing, even though I live a very hectic family-centered life with my 5 young children and also running the household. So do subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'll be back very soon with another exciting sewing video. Until I see you next time, guys, happy sewing. Bye.